Something just happened at a base in CENTCOM's area of responsibility on May 3 that most people following this conflict are overlooking. It wasn't an airstrike, it wasn't a new weapons deployment. It was just a photo, an A-10 Warthog taxiing on the runway, engines running, weapons fully loaded, conducting a combat sortie. CENTCOM posted it on its official account, without any warning, without any tough statement, just one single sentence. The A-10 can loiter for hours, ready to perform its mission whenever needed. And the notable part isn't the photo itself. The notable part is the timing when it was released, because just a few hours earlier, IRGC General Salami had declared that Iran was ready to open the gates of hell to any invading force. Foreign Minister Arakchi had just accused Washington of provocative behavior. Tehran's National Security Council had issued an official statement that renewed war was highly likely, and official Ibrahim Azizi had just warned that Trump's plan to lead ships through Hormuz starting Monday was a violation of the ceasefire. Iran escalated with the strongest language possible. CENTCOM responded with a photo. The question is why this exact type of aircraft, why at this exact moment, and what message it is targeting at the precise weak point in what Iran has left after Operation Epic Fury. To understand that, you need to understand two things at once: what has happened in the last 24 hours at the negotiating table and on the media front, and why Iran is still escalating with the strongest language possible while in its weakest military position in decades. Because once you understand that paradox, the photo of that Warthog with engines running will tell you more than any diplomatic statement made this week. Let's begin. To understand why that photo matters, let's start with what happened in the last 24 hours. Iranian leaders spoke out in unison, but anyone who's followed this conflict long enough immediately recognizes something false, not because it's new, but because it's so familiar. General Salami, one of the highest-ranking leaders of the IRGC, declared that Washington faced an impossible choice: either launch an unfeasible military campaign or accept a bad deal with terms Iran had already dictated. But that wasn't the most notable part. The notable part was the next sentence, that the IRGC was ready to open the gates of hell to any invading force, broadcast live on Iranian state media through the regime's official media system. This was not the personal opinion of a general. It was an organized, calculated message approved from the top down. At the same time, Foreign Minister Arakchi accused Washington of contradictory behavior and provocative statements, warning that any pressure from America would only make Tehran tougher. Official IRGC channels affirmed that the ceasefire was fragile and Iranian forces were fully prepared for all scenarios. Iran's National Security Council called renewed war highly likely if America did not concede. Two demands were repeated as non-negotiable conditions: control of Hormuz and refusal to dismantle the nuclear program. And right on this day, official Ibrahim Azizi warned that Trump's plan to lead ships through Hormuz starting Monday is a violation of the ceasefire, declaring that the strait will not be managed by Trump's delusional posts. If all of that sounds familiar, it's because it has happened before. Exactly the same threat structure, the same level of escalation, the same playbook Iran deployed in the weeks before Operation Epic Fury ignited. But to fully understand the picture of the last 24 hours, we need to look at what's happening inside Iran in parallel with those statements. Reports show the regime is carrying out executions of its people on a large scale. Anyone seen as a threat to the stability of the power apparatus is being eliminated. This is not the behavior of a force confident in its position. This is the behavior of a government that feels the ground beneath it shaking. Iran's leadership is fracturing along increasingly clear fault lines. The Ayatollah faction, the hardline IRGC, and factions controlling the Hormuz region are competing for influence in every negotiation session, each believing they hold the real card. The Deputy Speaker of Parliament declared he believed in the military but not in negotiations, a clear sign of the rift between the military faction wanting to continue confrontation and the diplomatic faction trying to find an exit. On the other side of the negotiating table, Trump held nothing back. Responding to the press, he said bluntly, "To be honest, it might be better not to negotiate at all. We can't let this situation continue." On Truth Social, he posted that Iran hasn't paid enough for its 47 years of behavior, that he was reviewing the latest proposal through Pakistani intermediaries, but can't imagine it could be acceptable. Two options were laid out clearly: a truly acceptable deal or military escalation. The ongoing naval blockade was mentioned as evidence that Iran had not yet felt enough pressure. And also yesterday, Trump announced that America would lead ships through Hormuz starting Monday with destroyers, over 100 aircraft and 15,000 troops, not a future threat, but a specific dated plan. To understand why CENTCOM chose the A-10 over any other aircraft in its arsenal, we first need to understand a basic principle in how U.S. Central Command operates its messaging during periods of tension. Every time CENTCOM releases an image of military equipment in the context of an ongoing conflict, it is a calculated message. Because if the goal was simply to show military strength, CENTCOM has many more visually impressive options. They could have released an image of the F-22 Raptor, fifth-generation stealth fighter, the symbol of absolute air superiority, a weapon no air force in the world today can counter. They could have released an image of the B-2 Spirit, strategic stealth bomber capable of carrying nuclear weapons, the weapon for the most hardened, deep underground targets any adversary could build. They could have released an image of the F-35, next-generation multi-role platform with superior electronic warfare and sensor capabilities, but they chose none of those. They chose the A-10. And the reason is not that the A-10 is the most aesthetically impressive aircraft. The reason is that the A-10 was designed precisely to destroy what Iran still has the ability to deploy at Hormuz. That is the real message. Not "we are strong," but "we know exactly what you have left, and we have the right weapon to handle every bit of it." To understand why that message carries such weight, we need to look at what Operation Epic Fury has actually done to Iran's military capabilities over the past 2+ months. Iran's air force has been rendered completely ineffective in practical combat. The traditional Navy no longer has the ability to confront U.S. forces at sea. As of March 2026, Admiral Brad Cooper publicly confirmed that U.S. forces had destroyed over 100 Iranian naval vessels, including 16 mine-laying ships on March 10 alone. Long-range air defense systems were targeted in the initial strikes by Black Tomahawk with radar-absorbent coating that Iran was unprepared to counter, and by Press-M with terminal speed too fast for Iran to react. On March 17th, the GBU-72, 5,000-pound bunker buster, destroyed underground anti-ship missile bunkers along the Hormuz coast. What remains is an asymmetric toolkit: cheap drone swarms, unarmored fast attack boats, kamikaze drone boats, and mine-laying capability that has been significantly degraded to the point where Iran is believed to have lost track of some laid mines, preventing them from fully opening the strait even if they wanted to. That toolkit is not enough to win a conventional conflict, but in theory enough to cause major maritime disruption, to create a global economic shock if deployed in the strait that is only 33 km wide at its narrowest point. And to understand why the A-10 is the perfect answer to exactly that toolkit, we need to understand its design philosophy, because the A-10 is not a fighter jet optimized for a secondary mission. It was built from the ground up, with a single goal, and its entire structure reflects that philosophy thoroughly. In the early 1970s, the U.S. Air Force needed a platform that could destroy heavy armor at low altitude over the European battlefield, and the solution Fairchild Republic came up with was not an aircraft that would fly fast to escape threats, but an aircraft designed to withstand threats and keep fighting. That difference is reflected in every structural detail: the 1.5-inch thick titanium bathtub cockpit surrounding the pilot and critical control systems, self-sealing fuel tanks, dual redundant flight control systems, and the ability to fly home after losing an entire engine. All those features are no longer just specifications on paper. In the Iran campaign, one A-10 survived multiple small arms hits and possibly RPGs while performing close air support to rescue a downed pilot, and still flew back to base safely. No other aircraft in the U.S. arsenal could do that in the same environment, and that is why the U.S. Congress blocked the Air Force's plan to retire the A-10, requiring a minimum of 103 aircraft to be maintained until September 2026. The war in Iran has definitively answered the question that years of Pentagon debate could not resolve. The central weapon of the entire platform is the GAU-8 Avenger, a 7-barrel 30mm depleted uranium armor-piercing rotary cannon firing at 3,900 rounds per minute, mounted to the airframe in such a way that the entire A-10 was essentially designed around that cannon and not the other way around. A typical IRGC fast attack boat ranges from 10 to 40 meters, completely unarmored, built to maximize speed, but speed does not protect something unarmored from a 1-second burst that puts about 65 rounds downrange in a dispersed pattern. This is the first time in history the GAU-8 has been used in a surface ship attack role in the Gulf, a completely new application for a weapon originally designed for Soviet tanks, and the cost asymmetry here is entirely in America's favor, a few $1,000s per burst versus millions of dollars to build a fast boat. But the GAU-8 is only the first layer, and it is the combination of new weapon layers that ensures no asset in the IRGC's remaining toolkit is outside the A-10's attack envelope. The APKWS-2 system, with 70mm laser-guided rockets, handles small surface targets, and its anti-drone version directly counters drone swarms. The AGM-65 Maverick provides standoff attack capability for larger or more hardened targets from a safe distance. AM-9M Sidewinders can engage attack drones when the opportunity arises. Precision-guided bombs add broad-spectrum attack capability from soft targets to hardened shore infrastructure. But the key difference from the F-35 or F-22 is not the weapon list, it is how the A-10 uses them. It flies low, slow, loiters over the target area for hours on end, observes with the naked eye to classify small and dispersed targets in a chaotic environment, then selects the right weapon for the right target in real time. Something fast, modern fighter jets cannot do effectively in the low-level battlefield environment the IRGC is trying to create at Hormuz. And that loiter capability is the most decisive tactical advantage in this specific environment, because every remaining Iranian threat needs time to deploy. Mine-laying ships need time to move into position. Drone swarms need time to assemble sufficient density to become dangerous, and every hour an A-10 spends flying above the strait is an hour that swarm boat commanders, mine transport ships, or IRGC shore units must choose between hesitation, dispersal, or hiding. None of this is theoretical anymore. CENTCOM has deployed the 75th Expeditionary Fighter Squadron, initially with 12 A-10s, later reinforced to 30, operating continuously at Hormuz from the early days of Operation Epic Fury. This is no longer preparation, this is real combat happening now. And the photo CENTCOM released today does not say, "We will do this." It says, "We are doing this, we have been doing this, and we will continue doing this." That raises another question. If Iran knows all of this, if they have witnessed what the A-10 has done to their naval assets from the early days of the campaign, why are they still escalating with exactly that language, exactly that playbook, when that playbook failed completely just a few months ago in the 12-day campaign? Because if we look back at the weeks before America and Israel opened fire on February 28, the picture looks almost identical to today. The same painful and prolonged strike declarations, the same affirmations of being fully prepared for all scenarios, the same language about opening the gates of hell. Iran used identical language, and Operation Epic Fury still ignited. That is not because Iranian leaders have no memory, but because this playbook is the only thing they have left, and the logic behind it remains the only logic that can justify the regime's existence. The core structure is very simple. Escalate rhetoric strongly enough to make the opponent blink, trade concessions for more time to do what the answer lies directly in the non-negotiable demand, the nuclear program. If Iran holds out long enough to reach an irreversible nuclear threshold, the entire negotiation balance shifts completely. That is why non-negotiable is not a negotiating stance, but the supreme strategic goal. But the most important sign of the regime's real position does not come from what they say externally, but from what they are doing internally. While the IRGC declares readiness to open the gates of hell, inside Iran the regime is executing its people on a large scale. Anyone suspected of disloyalty is being eliminated. A truly confident regime does not need mass executions to maintain control. This is the behavior of a government that feels its foundations shaking and is tightening internally to compensate for weakness externally. The only remaining geographic card, Hormuz, is also revealing its real limits. This 33-kilometer strait carries 20% of the world's oil and 20% of LNG, and the IRGC once tried to turn that geographic advantage into financial leverage by imposing a toll regime, charging ships passing through the strait. But Iran has lost track of some laid mines, preventing them from fully opening the strait, even if they wanted to. The Hormuz card is becoming a trap of its own maker, and CENTCOM is shrinking that toolkit day by day, from destroying 16 mine-laying ships on March 10 to destroying underground anti-ship missile bunkers with GBU-72 on March 17. In parallel, Iran is trying to pull Europe in as a counterweight to Washington, and they have reason to believe Europe has motive, because that motive is not ideals but money. London and European financial centers have benefited from the shaving per barrel mechanism, accumulating billions to trillions of dollars over decades. And the bluntest argument is, a significant portion of European financial circles is willing to accept a nuclear Iran as long as oil continues to flow through Hormuz. But that calculation is not playing out as Tehran expected. 22 countries, including Britain, France, and Germany, have signed a statement supporting guaranteed safe maritime passage through Hormuz, pulling Europe in the opposite direction from what Iran needs. And the deepest reason why this entire playbook is failing is because on the other side this time is a president who has said bluntly that a weak deal is worse than no deal, who is maintaining a naval blockade that has trapped 20,000 sailors at Hormuz and raised U.S. gas prices to 4.1 in Vivensi Kalinan without conceding, and who has just announced leading ships through Hormuz starting Monday, not a threat, not a warning, but a specific dated plan. Iran is using the old playbook in a completely new military and political reality, and the cards they thought they still had have thinned considerably compared to any point in this regime's history. What is happening at Hormuz on May 3 is not a one-sided confrontation between two sides trying to push each other across a boundary, but a multi-layered strategy designed to operate simultaneously across multiple dimensions, each layer amplifying the others, and the entire structure is operating right now in a way that Iran has no ability to counter on all fronts at once. The first and most concrete layer is economic. The comprehensive naval blockade declared by Trump on April 13 after the Islamabad negotiations collapsed applied to vessels of all nationalities entering or leaving Iranian ports regardless of flag or ownership. And CENTCOM has confirmed that this blockade order is being enforced in reality and not just on paper. On April 14, a U.S. destroyer physically forced 2 oil tankers trying to leave Iranian ports to turn back, not with radio warnings but physical blocking. This is not future pressure or potential threat. This is reality happening today, tightening day by day, and its consequences are already present in ways both sides can feel. The second layer is visible and continuous military presence, not symbolic presence, but actual combat forces operating. A-10s, F-16s, F-22s, and F-35s are all present and flying real sorties in CENTCOM's area of responsibility. Additional 2,500 Marines are being deployed to the region, the 82nd Airborne Division and more Marines are moving into position, and all of this is happening in parallel with negotiations, not replacing negotiations, but as the context in which negotiations take place. The third layer is time-limited diplomacy. The Pakistan channel remains open. Iran's 10-point proposal is still under review, but Trump set clear conditions and announced on May 3 that America would begin leading vessels through Hormuz from next Monday with over 100 aircraft and 15,000 troops. And this is not just a practical action, but an implicit deadline, because when that ship-leading campaign begins, Iran must choose between letting it happen and accepting the practical loss of control over Hormuz, or trying to stop it and triggering the next escalation. And the fourth layer, the layer that this morning's A-10 photo belongs to, is psychological and signaling, designed to close the illusion that more rhetoric will create concessions, that waiting long enough will change Washington's calculations, that stronger language will produce a different result than last time. These 4 layers do not operate independently. They are designed to amplify each other in a very specific way. The blockade creates real and continuous economic pain. Military presence prevents Iran from escalating to escape that pressure. Time-limited diplomacy creates the only narrow exit Iran can take if they choose, and psychological signaling closes off any illusions about other exits. But to understand why that four-layer structure has strategic effectiveness beyond pure pressure, we need to look at its real objective. Because the goal is not simply to force Iran to sign a paper denuclearization deal. The deeper goal is to create conditions that force Iran's own internal leadership to change their calculations, or change the power structure in a way that those calculations are made. And there is clear evidence that the pressure is having that effect, even if the external surface of IRGC statements does not show it. Iran's leadership is fracturing along ever deeper fault lines. The Ayatollah faction, with priority on maintaining ideological orthodoxy, the hardline IRGC with priority on maintaining their own military and economic power, and factions controlling the Hormuz region with their own calculations about the value of that geographic card in negotiations. And each faction is calculating differently about the costs and benefits of continued hardline versus concession at some point. Evidence of that rift is not hard to find. The Deputy Speaker of Parliament publicly declared that he believed in the military but not in negotiations, a statement directly contradicting the government's official position. The internal reaction to the April ceasefire was chaotic to the point it could not be hidden. Some celebrated, some were angry, and from inside the country, many Iranians publicly called on Trump not to negotiate with the government, but to support what they called the freedom struggle. This is a signal that external pressure is creating internal conversations the regime cannot fully control despite mass executions. The naval blockade plays an especially important role as a catalyst for those rifts because it does not impact all factions within the leadership equally. It creates winners and losers inside the same regime, and thus creates conflict over who bears the cost of hardline and who benefits from it. The history of coercive pressure shows a consistent pattern. Pressure that is large enough, sustained enough, and multidimensional enough often creates internal change before it creates external change, and the signs of that process are present in Iran right now, even if not clear enough yet to predict the outcome. And in the context of that overall strategic structure, this morning's A-10 photo plays a very specific role that no other aircraft could play in the same way. If CENTCOM had released an F-35 or F-22 photo, the message would be read as preparation for all-out conflict, and that is not the message Washington wants to send while negotiations are still ongoing. If they released a B-2 photo, the message would be strategic escalation, also not necessary at this time. But the A-10 says something very different and very specific. Not, we will destroy you with our best weapons, but we know exactly what you have left. We have the right weapons to handle every bit of it, and we do not need our best weapons. The right weapons are enough to finish what you have left. That is the language of real confidence, not escalation, not threat, not a show of strength to hide uncertainty. Just a reality presented through a photo and a caption, at the right time, with the right type of aircraft, aimed at the exact weak point, and that is why it says more than any diplomatic statement made this week. Looking at the entire picture emerging, there are three possible scenarios in the next 1 to 2 weeks, and they do not have equal probability, equal risk, or require the same set of conditions to become reality. The first scenario is a negotiation breakthrough, the lowest probability in the short term, but not zero, and the conditions for it depend largely on what happens next Monday when America begins leading vessels through Hormuz. If that campaign goes smoothly, ships pass, the IRGC does not react strongly enough to create an incident, and Tehran realizes that the Hormuz card has just been neutralized in practice without needing another round of airstrikes, then pressure on the pragmatic faction inside Iran to prevail over the hardline IRGC will increase significantly. The signs to watch are not public statements, but whether Iran begins to separate its Hormuz demands from its nuclear program demands in private negotiation channels, because that separation, if it occurs, is the clearest signal that one side inside Tehran is preparing for an acceptable deal. The second scenario is limited escalation at Hormuz. And this is the most dangerous scenario, not because it has the potential to lead to all-out conflict immediately, but because it is the scenario most likely to spiral out of control when both sides can misread each other's signals in real time. The IRGC is under internal pressure to do something to prove they still have capability and will, and that something does not need to be a large action, just enough to declare domestically that they are not standing by idly. And the most concerning warning signal has already appeared today. An oil tanker attacked by an unidentified object at Hormuz on May 3rd, with all crews safe, but the incident neither random nor meaningless. If limited escalation occurs, harassment of commercial shipping, small-scale drone swarms, or warning shots toward the lead convoy, then America's response will come from exactly the type of platforms CENTCOM posted a photo of this morning: A-10s and naval forces responding quickly, precisely, and limitedly, without escalating beyond what is necessary to handle the specific threat. This is precisely the scenario the A-10 was designed to handle, and this is also why this morning's photo has meaning beyond pure psychological signaling. The third scenario, and the most likely in the next 1 to 2 weeks, is continued stalemate. Iran continues rhetoric, America continues the blockade, and proceeds with leading ships. Neither side moves enough to change the basic balance, and pressure continues to accumulate until a variable changes strongly enough to force one side to recalculate. The decisive variable in that scenario is not what happens on the waters of Hormuz, but the speed of fracturing in Iran's leadership, and whether Trump sets a hard and public deadline for negotiations, because such a deadline would change the calculations of all factions inside Tehran in ways that no pure economic or military pressure alone could replicate. Let's step back and look at the bigger picture. More than 2 months ago, in the early hours of Operation Epic Fury, the world witnessed for the first time 3 weapons never before used in combat debut in the same campaign. Pre-SM, with double the range of ATAC-Ms fired from the same HIMARS launcher already in service. Lucas at $35, 000Z each, built from captured and improved Iranian Shahed drone technology, then turned back against its creator, and Black Tomahawk, with radar-absorbent coating that Iran's air defense systems had no data to counter. That was a message about the future, about what the U.S. arsenal is becoming. And today, the message is completely different but carries the same strategic weight. A 40-year-old A-10 Warthog, the type of aircraft the U.S. Air Force itself has repeatedly tried to retire, believing it obsolete in the modern battlefield, is the most perfect and irreplaceable answer to exactly what Iran can still deploy at Hormuz and the U.S. Congress was right to protect it from retirement, not because of theory, but because combat reality is proving it every day. When placing those two messages side by side, what stands out is not that America has the best weapons, but that America has the right weapons for each type of battlefield, from new generation ballistic missiles that can change the geostrategic equation in the Indo-Pacific, to a 40-year-old close air support aircraft that can loiter for hours above a narrow strait and patiently and systematically handle every fast boat, every drone, every mine-laying ship. For every nation watching this conflict, and all of them are watching, from Beijing to Moscow to every irregular force considering asymmetric tactics as a way to counter American power, the message is this: there is no asymmetric tactic, from cheap drones to straight blockades to unarmored swarm boats, that does not have a prepared, combat-proven answer already present in the region right now. Iran has not yet seen that clearly enough, or sees it but cannot change its calculations because of the internal constraints we have analyzed. The photo of the Warthog with engines running on the runway today is a reminder that that perception needs to change before the next decision is made in Tehran, and before the ship-leading campaign through Hormuz begins Monday morning. If analyses like this are valuable to you, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future content. We will continue to follow every development of this conflict as the ship-leading campaign through Hormuz begins on Monday. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next video.